So, is the U.S. ending dual citizenship for all U.S. citizens? And will U.S. citizens have to renounce any foreign citizenships that they hold? This is the topic of today's video. In this video, I'm going to go over this new bill that was introduced in Congress that would strip essentially U.S. citizens of dual citizenship, or would make U.S. citizens lose their U.S. citizenship. In this video, I'm going to go over essentially the legality of this bill, important considerations, some absurd, consequences that it could lead to, and just my general thoughts about it, because I know many are concerned about this. We've gotten several people reaching out that are super worried about it, so I wanted to address it immediately. First and foremost, welcome back to the channel. My name is Adrian Pandev. I'm an attorney who helps foreign nationals navigate the U.S. legal system as background. I used to work at the U.S. DOJ at the Office of Immigration Litigation, and I have spent the better part of the last 10 years working in the immigration field. So I've got quite a bit of experience when it comes to naturalization and citizenship matters in the U.S. And hopefully I can comment on this topic and make it interesting for you. If you like the content, please hit the like button. If you like the channel, please subscribe. That tremendously helps me. And that being said, let's jump right into the topic of discussion, which is Senator Moreno from Ohio introducing what is titled the Exclusive Citizenship Act of 2025. And let's jump right into what it actually says. So what this bill does is it creates an ultimatum for any U.S. citizen who holds foreign citizenships, whether it's one foreign citizenship or multiple. It creates a one-year deadline during which any such U.S. citizen has to renounce their foreign citizenship by writing to the U.S. Secretary of State, essentially Department of State, or alternatively, one can renounce their U.S. citizenship through a Department of Homeland Security process if during this only year period an individual does neither, so essentially doesn't renounce foreign citizenship with Department of State or renounce their U.S. citizenship with the Department of Homeland Security. In that case, the individual will be deemed to have automatically relinquished their U.S. citizenship. So essentially, if nothing is done during that one-year deadline period, you automatically lose your U.S. citizenship. In addition to that, any U.S. citizen who acquires a foreign citizenship in the future will automatically relinquish essentially voluntarily their U.S. citizenship upon becoming a citizen of another country in the future. So given that the U.S. is a land of immigrants, I understand that so many are concerned about this bill because so many Americans hold dual citizenship or multiple citizenships. That being said, I want to go over some of the major practical issues and also legal issues with this bill that everyone should keep in mind, because while it sounds scary, there's just a lot of important aspects that need to be clarified before this bill, I think, could go any further. The first one is the issue of renouncing is not so easy in many countries. So while the U.S. has a formal system of renouncing U.S. citizenship, not every country allows its citizens to give up their citizenship. So if you're born in one of those countries or born to a parent from one of those countries, you may be a citizen of that country without an ability to give it up. So I believe a common example for this, or a major example of this, is Argentina, where one can't just renounce their Argentinian citizenship. But I know there are many other countries where it's very difficult and up to the discretion of the country to allow it. So it may actually be technically impossible to renounce one's foreign citizenship like this bill demands. In addition to that, the way the renunciation would occur under this bill is by writing to the Secretary of State, writing a letter to the U.S. Secretary of State. But the problem is the U.S. Secretary of State does not have the authority and the power to renounce and end one citizenship in a foreign country that has to be done by the authorities in that foreign country. So essentially, if it's just going to be a letter, well, then it serves similarly to the current oath of allegiance, which every naturalized U.S. citizen takes. But there's no legal requirement to then go and give up foreign citizenship. So essentially, there's a lot of questions around how a US citizen would even renounce this foreign citizenship. And the mechanism in the bill seems to be a rather incorrect way of doing that. Legally speaking, similarly, there's an interesting legal issue on the renunciation of US citizenship side of the bill, because it says that if one doesn't want to renounce their foreign citizenship within a year, they have to renounce their US citizenship with the Department of Homeland Security. However, currently US citizenship renunciation is handled by Department of State ATOM, US embassies and consulates outside the country. So while there is sort of anyway, there's a statute that may allow Department of Homeland Security to do this. It's been essentially very rarely used, and if now DHS were to have to handle all these renunciations, it would create a ton of extra work for the agency, and new processes need to be created, which seems just highly unlikely if you ask me now. On top of all of these legal considerations, there is a massive tax consideration which wouldn't involve immigration agencies, but more the IRS and essentially individuals filing these tax returns. If all these US citizens all of a sudden were to become no longer US citizens, right? They treat their citizenship as renounced well. They may be subject to the exit tax, right? So I don't want to go into it. In this video, there's a specific set of rules, but if you have a certain amount of income, certain net worth when you exit the US tax code treats your assets as if you sold them on the day of exit and taxes them according to that. So there would be a huge exit tax event. And because essentially the bill says that anyone who doesn't do anything in that 1 year time frame automatically voluntarily relinquishes their US citizenship, there could be essentially millions of Americans who could have to pay this exit tax on their way out, which could become a massive issue as well. From a tax perspective, not just immigration perspective, perhaps the most interesting practical consequence if this bill were to become law is that it would actually negatively impact the president's family, because both the First Lady and the president's son are dual citizens, US and Slovenian dual citizens, so it would require them to relinquish their Slovenian citizenship, which is just an interesting sort of practical consequence affecting the president and the president's family. If all of this isn't enough, there's actually a very big constitutional law question which calls the bill's legality into question. So there's a case called Afro-M versus Rusk, in which the Supreme Court held that Congress cannot take U.S. citizenship away from a U.S. citizen, and that U.S. citizenship can only voluntarily be relinquished. So unless it's a voluntary act, one cannot lose their U.S. citizenship now. The way this bill tries to go around that is by setting up essentially this waiver where the argument will be it's voluntary because the individual had that choice in that 1 year period, whether to keep it or not. I am not convinced that that's going to be held to be a voluntary act by a U.S. citizen that would meet these standards set in the ARA case. And essentially, this bill will likely be argued to be a violation of one's constitutional rights under the 14th Amendment as clarified in that OFRO case. So if you've gotten this far into the video, you can probably tell that I don't think that this bill in its current form is going to become law. I just think there's too many legal issues, constitutional issues, practical issues with this bill for it to become law. So if you're worried about that, I think most, probably, that is not a concern. But what I do think is a concern is the mere existence of this bill, because what it shows is that Congress gravely misunderstands how citizenship and these rules work. And what is completely misunderstood here is that one could become a dual citizen without them taking any actions, right? Could derive citizenship due to the birthplace of your parent in some cases, or your birthplace because your parents were vacationing in a particular country? Right? So there's a lot of ways that one can become a dual citizen without one ever intending to become a dual citizen. And what the problem with these bills is that it could restrict American citizens' ability to essentially freely live their life and take certain jobs, et cetera, So that's where I would be very, very concerned because I'm concerned where this could lead, where this is a first step in sort of a scary pathway towards restricting certain Americans from participating in certain processes. And that I think will be scary anyway. If you found the video helpful, if you have questions or you know any comments on this topic, post them in the comments section below and I'll do my best to record similar videos in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.